Hello everyone, my name is Soraya,
And my name is Edoardo.
and we're going to be talking about the topic of gray hat hacking for our final deliverable for CMPT 320. So although we'll be looking more in depth at the definition later, gray hat hackers often resort to illegal means without malicious intent to carry out their hacks. So before getting into the specifics of this type of hacker, let's look at the definition of hacking and the most common driving forces behind a hacker's actions. So what is hacking exactly? Hacking is defined as an attempt to exploit digital device and network data through unauthorized access to a computer system. And the focus here is on the word unauthorized, meaning without permission. Another definition by Fortinet is hacking is the misuse of devices like computers, smartphones, tablets, and networks to cause damage to or corrupt systems, gather information on users, steal data and documents, or disrupt data-related activity. So as you can see, it's definitely a wide array of activities. So who are hackers? Hackers are individuals who use computer networking or other skills to overcome a technical problem. It's also understood as those who use their abilities to gain unauthorized access to systems or networks in order to further specific agendas. And again, that highlighting on unauthorized access is key here. And the specific agendas are definitely things that we will kind of get into later on. So let's now look at the most common motives for hackers. So there are 4 common motives. The first one is financial gain. This could be from defrauding financial services to simply theft or credit card details. The second is corporate espionage, so to gain an advantage on competition. The third one is to gain notoriety, so gaining fame and public presence. And then the fourth is state-sponsored, and so this could be in the form of government espionage. And a fifth motive that is often not officially listed is idealism, which is one of the main motives of gray hats, and which also gives rise to a category of hackers known as hacktivists. So hacktivist is a person who gains unauthorized access to computer files or networks to further social and or political ends. And certain examples of this are things like Anonymous or Lusec or WikiLeaks. So these are usually the motivations behind more substantial hacks that happen on a large scale and are driven by some sort of agenda. But the reasons for hacking can be rooted in more nuanced psychological motives, such as the 4 different topics you see below. So number 1 is the compulsion to hack. Number 2 is curiosity. Number 3 is control and attraction to power. And number 4 is peer recognition and belonging to a specific group. So to illustrate the different psychological reasons for hacking, we can consider 3 types of hackers. The first one is the novice, the second is the cyberpunk, and the third is hacktivist. So just to give a bit of an overview on these, novice, which like the name suggests, are still inexperienced and mostly driven by curiosity. And their motivations, as you can see, are curiosity, recognition, and recreation. Number 2 are cyberpunk. So on the other hand, these are low to medium skilled hackers who wreak havoc for fun. And that's their main intent, by attraction to power as well as peer recognition. So they have different motivations such as financial, recognition, revenge, and recreation. And then the third are hacktivists, which includes gray hat hackers, and they're mostly driven by idealistic pursuits. And so their motivations fall under recognition, revenge, recreation, and ideology. So now that we have a reason, now that we know the reasons that drive hackers' actions, we will glance at the categories of hackers based on their goals and legality of their actions, to then focus specifically on gray hat hackers. So the main categories you can see here are white hat hackers, black, gray, red, blue, and green. So white hat hackers are a professional hired by a company with the specific intent of maintaining or increasing the existing security of the computer system. Black hat hackers, on the other hand, are an individual who breaks into other parties' computer systems illegally without permission and alters data with malicious intent. Gray hat hackers, which again we will get into in depthly later, are a combination of both white hat hacking and black hat hacking. So you can kind of understand that would kind of be the mesh of the two. Red hat hacking is closely related to the methods of white hackers. However, they will take down black hat computers and resources without resorting to the authorities. So it's something that is not done publicly. And then blue hat hacking are employed by the company to find vulnerabilities in unreleased products, and in some circles they are known as vengeful hackers. And similarly to the previous, it's also similar to white hats. And lastly, green hat hackers are aspiring hackers who, though they lack technical hacking skills and education, are still eager to learn the tricks of the trade. So they are the kind of the wannabe hackers who are not quite there yet, but still put in that effort. And so now that we have identified the different types of hackers, we are going to focus more closely on gray hat hacking and hackers. So the interesting part of gray hat hacking is the fact that, like their very name suggests, their actions can't be easily categorized as right or wrong. And as the name suggests again, they're kind of in that gray area. What makes gray hat hackers' actions difficult to categorize is the fact that their intentions are often noble and idealistic, but the means by which they achieve them are illegal. And so they tend to often violate standards and principles without the intent of harm. And so they're typically done for the common good, but like I said, publicly and often illegally. And so, for instance, the USA had a comprehensive document called the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act that defines and outlines any activity done without authorization by a hacker. This document outlines a hacker's actions and what actions should be taken based on each scenario, and potentially even leading to being legally prosecuted. And so this is something that the USA took on and uses as a standard to base their acts. So let's take a couple of examples, take a look at a couple of examples to challenge the act. So there's two controversial examples. The first one is by Aaron Swartz, and then the second is Edward Snowden. So Aaron Swartz was an American programmer who you might indirectly know, as he was the co-founder of Reddit, which is a commonly used system online today. On top of being a brilliant mind, he was a very idealistic man, and he was single-mindedly focused on abolishing internet censorship and making knowledge, and specifically scientific knowledge, accessible and transparent to anyone. And so just to give you an idea of the kind of man he was, he also co-wrote the Guerrilla Open Access Manifesto, and that was a manifesto that called for activists to liberate information locked up by corporations or publishers. And he also co-founded Demand Progress, which was an online advocacy group, and that group successfully campaigned against internet censorship bills. And so to him, it was somewhat inconceivable that scientific progress would have to be slowed down by scientific papers being copyrighted and be made accessible to paying viewers only. And so what really happened to him? Well, he used an MIT computer to download numerous academic articles from the online archive JSTOR. He was prosecuted to either spend 35 years in jail or a payout of $1 million. And so how can we categorize his actions though? Swartz did in fact do something that was illegal, but he didn't do any damage to people or property, and something that was stated in the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. And so his actions reflect the nature of gray hat hacking, as they are really hard to pin down as right or wrong. And so it does fall in between that kind of gray area. And so much as though that after committing suicide from fearing a 35-year jail sentence, a bill called Aaron's Law came to life to take into account more gray areas of hacking like this one. Aaron's Law, although it never actually became a real law, takes into account more nuanced aspects of the hack, such as how severe were the consequences, was there any significant damage done, what was the importance of the document stolen, and in essence, the punishment must be proportional to the crime. And in Aaron's case, the punishment seems to have been completely out of proportion. And so now let's take a look at a case that differs quite significantly from Aaron Swartz's story, and that is Edward Snowden.
So Edward Snowden was a National Security Agency employee and former CIA employee as well. His job was primarily as an IT consultant and cybersecurity expert, and he gained notoriety in 2013, which coincidentally is the year when Aaron Swartz committed suicide, after leaking to 3 journalists from The Guardian extremely sensitive information about surveillance programs that were run by the NSA. The information that he released was concerned with the monitoring of communications of everyday citizens, as well as another program named PRISM. PRISM tapped into the servers of 9 internet companies, including Apple, Facebook, and Google, to spy on people's privacy, and that included audio, video chats, photographs, so very, very sensitive material. The program also mentioned spying on leaders of other countries that included Germany's Chancellor Angela Merkel. Snowden eventually fled the USA to escape prosecution and avoid a 30-year sentence, and he now lives in Russia with his family. And legally speaking, Snowden's actions were prosecutable in a plethora of ways, but can we truly say that he was right or wrong? He did violate the Espionage Act, but his intentions seem to be prone to educate the public and expose information that he thought would make the public aware of something that was done to them without their consent. So some people consider him a traitor and some others a patriot. But regardless of how someone may feel about him, we should know what he sacrificed to educate the public and expose the NSA's programs. For instance, he had an extremely stable job, was living in Hawaii with his family, and was making north of $200,000 annually. So what he did was not a stunt, but was a strong ideological stance against the violation of privacy, despite being legally prosecutable. And as a side note, in light of Snowden's case, President Obama assigned 2 teams to investigate the surveillance programs run by the NSA. Some laws and regulations were in fact implemented, such as how long the data could be withheld for, but the nature of the programs was never really addressed. And so although legally liable, Swartz and Snowden's actions can be hard to assess as morally right or wrong. So let's take a look at them through the eyes of some ethical theories that we previously examined in the course. The first one is utilitarianism. So this is a philosophy that was proposed by Mill, and it revolved around the greatest happiness principle. The greatest happiness principle stated that one should act in such a way to maximize the pleasure or minimize the pain for the greatest number of people. However, another milestone of utilitarianism is duty, which is considered a moral obligation. And whenever an individual is posing an obstacle to a person's ability to perform his duty, it is considered morally wrong. So in the situation of gray hackers, it's the system administrators that have a duty to provide the security, integrity, and availability of the program. And a hacker is, in fact, preventing a system admin from performing his duty, and therefore his actions are deemed immoral. Now let's take a look at Kantian's morals. So Kant divides duty into a 4-square matrix, which categorizes perfect and imperfect duties for ourselves and others. So perfect duties are concerned with what is required and necessary to life, whereas imperfect duties are not required for life, but are in one's best interest to pursue. So in the case of gray hat hackers, perfect duties to others can be to help other people. However, for a duty to become a universal truth, it needs to be analyzed as if it's something that an individual would also be comfortable to have others do unto him. So in the case of gray hat hackers, they would not want any other individuals to hack into their computers, which makes their actions immoral according to Kantian logic. And finally, we're going to look at Aristotelian virtue, which revolves around a principle that Aristotle defined as to possess a virtue is not enough, because one must also exercise virtue in action to the proper extent, to the proper person, and at the proper time. So let's now consider hacking the virtue and the 3 main aspects of Aristotelian virtue to be extent, time, and people. So if we look at extent, then we would know that great hackers exercise their virtue of being able to, in fact, hack by gaining access to a computer system, exploiting vulnerabilities, and often crashing a specific software. In regards to time, there's never really a good time for a company to be hacked or an individual to be hacked. And when we look at people, there are no proper people, so to speak, on which to perform this action. For instance, a cybersecurity team or system admin will spend far more time than the usual workload in tracking down the hackers and to control the damage. So even according to Aristotelian virtue, gray hats are acting immorally. So how do we really evaluate on an ethical level what gray hat hackers do? How can we consider their actions? Well, the story of Aaron Swartz and Edward Snowden are two examples of how challenging it can be to answer such question, because even though the ideals propelling the hack seem to be ethical and noble, the law doesn't agree. The general public, however, seems to generally be supportive of causes they deem ethical, such as with the Swartz case, when the protests after his death were rampant and put in motion a request for a bill, which was, like we previously mentioned, Aaron's Law. So Aaron's Law was concerned with further assessing the gravity of a hacker's actions before deciding on the legal repercussions. Edward Snowden, on the other hand, is constantly asked to be a guest speaker at conferences, universities, and, as a side note, also the Joe Rogan podcast, as a voice of reason against the violation of privacy and non-consensual data gathering. So it seems that the support of the general public is the most reliable indicator of whether a gray hat hacker's actions are moral or not. But that doesn't take away from the fact that it's the hackers themselves that are putting everything on the line for what they stand for, even if sometimes that means unknowingly risking their lives. Thank you for your attention and have a great day.